You're listening to Music Tectonics.
Welcome back to Music Tectonics, where we go beneath the surface of music and tech. I'm your host, Dmitri. I'm also the founder and CEO of Rock, Paper, Scissors, the marketing and PR firm that specializes in music innovation, and the founder of the Music Tectonics Conference, which is taking place this week in Santa Monica. My guest today is Neil Sheehan, the president of Vocana, a streaming platform built for independent artists and fans using a user-centric payment model. We talk about how that's different from other streaming services, why social features haven't worked on streaming platforms since the days of MySpace, and whether there's room for indie-focused platforms in what feels like a Spotify-dominated world. It's a great conversation, but first, the news.
Rock, paper, scanner.
This month, we're going to, as I said, do this news roundup. We do it every week on the Music Tectonics podcast, but this is a video community version of it. I'm typically joined by either Tristra New-Year-Jaeger, our chief strategy writer and strategist at Rock, Paper, Scissors, or Jade Preboy, who's our new head of business, to pull out a few highlights from the industry news and talk about the implications. Let's bring them on stage. Hi, Tristra. Hi, Jade.
Hello, hello. Good afternoon, morning, evening, all the things.
You're in the green room.
I am in the green room. This is what we call the Bat Cave at RPS HQ. Just you're really getting a behind the scenes view, everybody. But this is our little quiet room in our open office where you can shout and, record podcasts and talk to people about news articles and all that fun stuff.
And fake Zoom voices.
Yes.
So this is kind of a part of a practice we do at Rock, Paper, Scissors that we refer to as horizon scanning. We're paying attention to trends and news stories to see what's resonating in the industry. We use it to help advise our clients, and it could be related to products or services, as well as like narratives and marketing, thinking about where they can weave themselves into the thought leadership conversations. So we kind of bring our clients into the trends to help them increase their share of voice in media, et cetera. But it's also just, you can listen to the podcast as we're doing it as well, and just kind of use it as a way to sort of put things in context. There's a lot of headlines coming our way, and it's fun. I oftentimes will pull out articles because I'm interested in them, and then I want to hear what Tristra and Jade have to say about them as well. So we're going to kick off with an article that was in Music Business Worldwide this week called Suno in talks to raise $100 million at a $2 billion valuation, just released its most advanced free AI music tool yet. I pulled the article for a couple of reasons. The thing that caught my eye was the $2 billion valuation. I thought to myself, has any music tech company emerged this quickly to get that valuated? Do you say valuated, Tristra? I don't actually know.
It's a double unicorn. Have we ever had a double unicorn that fast in the music business?
Well, I don't know when Suno was founded. What was it? 2 years, 4 years? I don't know. It's just a few years.
Yeah. Just a couple years ago.
And I thought I would point AI at AI, and I asked ChatGPT, which is probably wrong, but it's still a good place to... Sorry, I shouldn't say it's probably wrong. There's a good chance that it made some of this stuff up. But I asked, what other music tech companies have done this? Obviously, major labels like Universal and Warner are multi-billion-dollar valuations. They're publicly traded. They've been around for a long time, et cetera. The one that came up that was kind of close was Epidemic Sound. And according to this, again, who knows if there's any hallucinations here, I have to check my facts. It hit, I think, $1.4 billion in 2021. It raised $450 million at that valuation, and it took 12 years to get there. So just as, if that's accurate, just a reference point for, has any other kind of music tech innovation companies gotten this big, this fast? The answer is probably no.
And Benji Stein, thanks for chiming in the chat that those are DistroKid 2021 valuation numbers. So interesting. Interesting.
Yeah, there's some distributors that Believe comes up in the list as well too. But I guess just, regardless of the exact sort of figures, it seems fast, it seems big, and it is sucking a lot of the air out of the room around music tech investment conversations as well as IP conversations, right? And, where's music getting created and all that kind of stuff. Now, the article actually is a lot about the newest versions of Suno in terms of what it can do, adding voice and taking over as an AI DAW and all the new features there. So there's a lot to dig into there. there. But I will also mention that the week prior, maybe it was 2 weeks ago, there was an announcement that Spotify is working with all the major labels around AI tools. It was a little bit vague about what those AI tools will be. Is this music creation stuff?
Yeah.
Is this remix stuff?
I was also going to add there was some coverage of some patents that I think Music Business Worldwide reported on that Spotify has for mashups and mixes and some other things. So I think it's still a little vague, but it's kind of coming into focus looking at all the pieces.
Yeah. And so, the interesting thing there is Spotify getting into the mix, right? Saying, hold on, wait a second. If all the music attention is going someplace else and we actually do licenses, like we're actually paying for this stuff, whereas Suno has basically, and Udio has publicly kind of acknowledged that they've just scraped copyright and not done deals, even though there's been talks that maybe they're in conversations, there's settlements, conversations, etc., but it's not all figured out yet. Just kind of interesting that Spotify / the major labels say, well, hang on, the deals can be done, which is kind of maybe the entire point, whether a deal gets done or not, or whether anything gets released, of saying, no, you can negotiate these deals. We are open to doing that as well. So anyway, just wanted to pull that one out. Trishra.
This is a great segue. I wanted to talk about an article where the rubber really meets the road with generative music. And this is from one of my favorite newer outlets out there that's music focused, that's sort of more consumer facing, but it's from hearingthings.co. Some refugees from Condé Nast Bloodletting at Pitchfork have created a really lovely music site, and they have some pretty good taste. So I've found some really great stuff from them. Anyway, this is about the industry though, and it has a great header, which is, why is it so easy to flood streaming with AI slop? And they come to some interesting conclusions. They really do a deep dive in looking at where the stuff is coming into the ecosystem. And they really focus at, just as some recent NPR reporting did, on these sort of mid-tier bands. So bands that aren't on anyone's watch list as like a major name where they're likely to be victims of fraud, but are kind of get more listens than just, some rando, right? Or some made-up artist, some artificial artist. So there's a really interesting breakdown of how artists are reacting to this, what they're doing, and kind of what the state of play is. So I really recommend that article, as well as Hearing Things in general. But I think it really points to that there are, this isn't just a theoretical discussion we're having, right? Here is how the harm is being done, not just to individual creative people and artists, but also potentially to the industry, right? So it's a new method of defrauding, or taking from the pro rata pot. So I thought that was a really interesting piece, and it's cool to see this kind of detailed reporting. And the NPR piece had a totally different artist. So this is something that's kind of happening across the spectrum of creators and artists. So interesting stuff to think about.
The whack-a-mole of fakes and semi-fakes is just gotten harder because the tools of creation are so easy. Whether the song's good or not, who knows? But they're mixing up the metadata in the process. Like, shit, we haven't even solved round one on metadata. And here we are with something that's now flooding. They're not just flooding with music, but they're flooding metadata that's maybe even less accurate than what we were trying to get to as an industry.
Yeah, there's a story in one of these reports of an artist getting a bunch of DMs from fans saying hey, this is a really weird new release you've been out, and he's like, I haven't put out any new music under that project since 2015 or something. And it was a complete fake, and the fans were kind of distressed because it was not up to the usual standards and the style of that group. So there is brand damage being done. It's interesting.
And, it speaks to sort of these shifts in technology totally transforming kind of the access and the layers and who is putting themselves in front of the interactions between the users of the internet, listeners of music, and whatever content is there as well. Because, obviously we kind of went through the era of Google search, where all of a sudden Google was actually taking a lot of power away from publishers of media because they were putting ads on top of everybody else's content after they scraped it and indexed it and search engine optimized it, etc. And then social media did the same thing. Facebook / Twitter first, of sort of doing the same thing. Wait, there's another layer between whoever's creating the content and who's ingesting, reading, listening to, watching the content. And now AI is doing the same thing, and that's especially the case with a Suno or an Udio or any kind of unlicensed AI where they're putting themselves between the intellectual property, the copyright, and then the creator as well as the listener. But I pulled up, and by the way, I just posted in the chat here on this live version of our Rock Paper Scanner News Roundups the articles we've been talking about. This third one is from Gizmodo. AI is killing Wikipedia's human traffic. Wikipedia's human traffic is declining as more people rely on AI tools for answers. I mean, I think, there's not a person on this call or in the internet connected world that has not clicked through to a Wikipedia link to find something out, to get the quick Cliff Notes version of something. Obviously, it didn't hallucinate the way that AI did, but it definitely was wrong at times. There were humans hallucinating when they posted comments on Wikipedia. And, this is not music related, but it's sort of, Trisha and Jade, we oftentimes look at these parallel moments of media or industries and verticals to say, well, if this happened with film, how's it going to impact music? If this happens with books, how's it going to happen with music? If this happens with journalism, how's it going to happen with music? Or vice versa as well. And I think this is just, when you think about the massive scale of Wikipedia, not only in terms of content, but in terms of its use, the role that it has come to play in people's learning and research and understanding and communication, it just points to the fact that we know this is happening with search, where everyone's concerned like, oh no, I'm losing my web traffic because people are going to ChatGPT instead of to Google. People are also seeing that impact on Wikipedia. So I just thought it's another kind of a moment in time to say, whoa, this is a biggie to see that significant decline in traffic. It also talks about bots too, and how do you measure who the heck is looking at a given website or digital platform as well. So that's an interesting piece of it too. Maybe all the AI will be scanning the internet and, we'll be writing, we're writing content for AI, guys. We're not writing content for people.
Yes, one of the joys of publicity.
Well, and if you put it in the music scale, it's like, okay, so you've got AI making music, and then you've got these fraud bots that you're talking about, and AI is listening to music. It's like, wait, what? Well, AI should be paying for it too, damn it.
Maybe someday it will. There's one more thing that I wanted to bring to everybody's attention this week, and that is the TikTok deal. I get tired just saying that.
Yeah. How many times have we talked about the TikTok deal?
It's like, please, can we just make it stop? I think that's part of the strategy is just to make us all so exhausted that we don't care anymore. But there apparently today, at least the geopolitical framework is being, as Secretary Scott Bessent put it, consummated between, which is just there's so many disturbing things about this news. We're finally coming to some kind of framework that will solve the geopolitical tensions. ByteDance will retain 20%. I think we're going to have a lot of the data is going to apparently be stored here in the U.S. because, now, don't we all feel safer now that is under complete U.S. control, so to speak? Maybe, kind of. I'm not sure how exactly that's supposed to work, or at least on paper it will be that way. And we'll have some of Trump's friends be put into place as the leadership at the company. Though there are some internet watchdog type groups that are like, this is going to increase the surveillance state in the US. And then there's some other folks that are like, what does this even mean? And of course, Music Ally had a quick little glimpse of it from the music industry business. But we've had a lot of great research lately from folks like the folks at Media about, is TikTok even really a sustainable discovery method maybe it's discovery method for music, but is it a career growing method? Is it a truly sustainable artist engine versus just like ways to find tracks that you kind of listen to in the background, the way a lot of streaming services used to be? So we're at an interesting moment. It'll be interesting to see what happens with TikTok and how the kids react to this new deal.
Yeah, we used to get status updates from our friends, and now we get status updates about what President Trump did to the ownership of TikTok and whether it's going to happen or not and who's going to buy it and so forth. But yeah, it may be finally coming to a quote resolution. But the other thing is, it says that ByteDance is retaining a 20% stake. So it's like, what,
I mean, today TechCrunch reported that Vinod Khosla was talking about how the U.S. government should take a 10% ownership stake, just like it did with Intel in all companies. I was like, okay, that reminds me a lot of a certain USSR type thing. Like, what are we doing here, people? Anyway, all right, enough politics. You caught me and you recorded me.
But yeah.
Enough politics for me.
Jade, you want to get in on any of this? You've been listening closely.
Yeah, no, this is great. I mean, I think some of the themes here are that it's bigger than music. That's my kind of takeaway. I mean, in terms of comparing, the Suno raising money at a $2 billion valuation, that sounds more like Facebook or Uber in the early days, where instead of it being, is this company going to become profitable? The question is this company going to become ethical? AI coming for Wikipedia, it's changing the way that everyone's, interacting with the streaming services and how they're uploading. And not everyone's doing this, but it's making it ridiculously easy to do a lot of these things. And TikTok, it's been, I pretty much, you guys nailed it on the TikTok conversation. But I think that in terms of themes, it's really just, it's bigger than music. I think that's what my takeaway is. And even when they build engines, they listen to them. It's a part of the harmonics of building the engine. So I think that there's this, I think that the Suno thing could be a big thing in terms of just how, it could change tech in general, outside of music. So, that's kind of my general thinking on it.
It's going to be really, it's interesting to see whether we're like, is the era of social media kind of falling away? And as, if you hang around with some of younger internet users, you'll see they're getting less and less interested in scrolling. And the whole goal of TikTok is to turn it into a giant kind of like virtual QVC with UGC, right? And so is that going to be of interest to anyone in a year or two? Maybe to some people, just like QVC is still very popular with certain people. But I don't know if it's how it's going to serve the music industry, maybe other than as a distribution platform with a little revenue stream or something. But we'll see. I could be totally wrong.
Tristra, you and I both have teenage kids. And I have to say, my teenager deleted TikTok in round one for political. I didn't say anything. I mean, I should have. I shouldn't have even given them a phone, honestly. But deleted TikTok 2 years ago, and deletes Instagram every week. Like they delete it and then they download it again to check on some stuff, and then they delete it again.
They're trying to keep themselves like safe and sane, and my kids My kids wrestle with Reddit. They're always like, but who are these people? Who's saying this? Why are they saying this? But it's so interesting to watch how younger people who've just grown up swimming in this soup react to these waves.
Tristra, Jade, thanks for jumping in with these articles. This is super fun. And that's usually how we do it on the podcast. So if you haven't checked it out, check out almost the beginning of every episode. We do what you guys just heard live here.
Now for our feature interview.
Neil Sheehan is the president of Vocana, a social music streaming platform designed for indie artists and their fans, where subscription dollars go directly to the artists you stream. Vocana stands out with its user-centric payment model, social engagement features, merch integration, and listener data analytics to empower artists to connect them with their audience. Specializing in independent music, Neil has founded and successfully sold 2 companies, HM, a band management and concert promotion firm, and Standby Records, a record label. Now with Vocana, Neil is building a home for music's indie heartbeat and a more fair future for streaming. Welcome to the show, Neil.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, this is going to be fun. I think it's really interesting to talk about this user-centric model and how you came to that, how it operates, and so forth. So let's dive in, Neil. You've called what indie artists face on streaming services unfair competition. Why do you see it that way, and what needs to change?
Well, I think we should unpack that first to take a step back of what streaming was supposed to do for music 15, 20 years ago in its infancy. If people can remember how music was distributed was via CDs or some kind of medium, physical medium, that you had to use some kind of distributor that was most likely attached to a major label or a rack jobber, and you would get into stores. And streaming came along to kind of democratize that, right? The distribution of music would now be for everybody in a very easy way instead of going to a store, and then any artist that could upload their music could now be listened to. And I think the maturation of streaming after 15, 20 years, we've kind of seen when you have 3 million new tracks going into a Spotify or an Apple or a Deezer or a Tidal, the democratization is there. It's now available to everybody, but is discovery there? So I think that's where the unfair competition comes in, where essentially it's not Spotify or any of these other DSPs' fault, but there is now so much music and so much more independent music than major label music that discovery and payments are much harder. So I think there's this unfair competition feeling for whether you are a DIY in your garage or if you are with an indie distributor or indie label, where it's hard to be found. You're a needle in a haystack. And the more that songs that go on and the more the algorithms favor major label distribution or major labels themselves, the more unfair it becomes for somebody that's starting. So I think that's where we think where it becomes an unfair competition. It's not because of the companies themselves. It's just the maturation of the market and how music is now engaged with fans.
Interesting. I mean, and I think some of that has to do with the maturation of streaming as a market, as a medium. How do you build a new streaming service right as this market is maturing?
Well, look, I don't know if the market is truly maturing. I know in what they would say primary countries like the US and England and Canada, maybe it's plateauing a little bit, but there are other countries out there. There's billions more people out there that don't have access to streaming yet. Now, does that mean you have to go to a foreign market to capture that niche? No, I just think, again, this may harken back to the discovery portion of things where the mature market of people that are willing to pay for music may have plateaued because they can't find anything new. They're being served up the same 4 or 5 million tracks. So for a DSP today to gain new subscribers, they are going to have to go into different verticals. You see it now with Spotify going into audiobooks. So I think streaming has a bigger market play than they think. I just think you now have to bifurcate some of that and be able to advertise and prop up things that people will pay for in the streaming music market that they don't have access to today.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, one of the big differentiators here, and I think part of your thesis with Vocana has to do with this user-centric payout model. How did you develop your user-centric payout model, and how does it work? What makes it different from some of the artist-centric models that we've heard about that are already in use?
Yeah, it's a question we get routinely. You guys are doing exactly what Deezer and SoundCloud are doing. Let me take a step back. Deezer has an artist-centric system, right? That is not a user-centric system. Let's define what the two are. Artist-centric is essentially your subscription dollars go into this large pie, and it's called pro rata. That money then gets divvied up by market share. So even though you may be listening to the most indie of independent bands, whoever you listen to, that subscription dollar is going to go to the largest market share. So Taylor Swift, Drake, MGK. So what they have, Deezer, has a true pro rata model. They just have double boosting of certain songs. There's different ways to actually get more money based on an algorithm. So that is true artist-centric. It's not a true user-centric system. SoundCloud has a user-centric system, but there's a caveat to that. There's loopholes. You have to be part of SoundCloud Premiere or SoundCloud Repost to actually get into the user-centric system. So what we did is we kind of went to the heart of who created user-centric. That was Mike Plazensky at SoundCloud. He became an independent contractor. He came in and basically adopted essentially what SoundCloud was doing, but made us more prolific at it. There's no bells and whistles. You just jump in as soon as your subscription dollars go out. It goes to the main artist that you listen to, and that's it. You don't have to be part of a distribution platform. There's no boosting of plays, etc. So it's the most true user-centric system there is, and nobody's tested this yet. We'll see. The proof will be in the pudding if people get paid more fair or not. But you can do very quick math that if you have 10 people subscribing to an entire platform and they just listen to you, you're going to make $10. Doesn't matter how many streams they get, right? So how long is it going to take you to make $10 on Spotify or Apple or another service versus if 10 people are listening to you paying $10 each, right? So it's unique. And I think we'll see, because we only have independent content, that we will show that independence and DIY, if you are within our system, would definitely make more money than if you were on a DSP that had the pro rata model.
So wait, let me see if I've got this right. So you're saying that a certain percentage of a subscription from a user will be divided across the artists that they are streaming, and that's how the royalties will be paid out.
Exactly. So if you really take the model of $10 and you say you're listening to 10 artists, $1 of each of the subscription would go to those artists that you're listening to. So it has nothing to do with the amount of streams. It's the direct artists you're listening to. So you're only listening to a certain number of artists. That's where the subscription dollars would go. There's no pro rata model. There's no pooling of user subscriptions. It directly goes to the artists you listen to.
How does Vocana make any money if all that money is going out to these?
Well, obviously, we are like any other DSP. We pay performance royalties, a mechanical royalty, right? Those are things that need to go back to the artist as well. And then there's a market share that we have, obviously a cut that we take, and it's less than 30%. So on a $10 subscription, $7 of that is obviously allocated to the artist.
Got it. Okay. Got it. How come nobody's done this yet?
Major labels don't want it. I think they have anathema towards user-centric. It doesn't work for them. Obviously, pro rata props up major label content or the most listened to content because your subscription dollars goes towards the largest market share, of the listener. So I think Deezer is trying to do that with their artist-centric model, even though it's pro rata. They did a deal with Universal. But again, it's not a true user-centric model. SoundCloud has obviously tried it and is doing it in some form or fashion. But again, you must be part of their distribution model before you even got that, or you have to be with a label that they've signed up that deal with. So I think it's two parts. It's the major label system doesn't like it. So any large DSP won't be able to do it. And B, if you want to run it, it's difficult because nobody's ever done true user-centric reporting. So you're literally starting at a baseline and trying something that nobody's ever done before. So that in itself is, you have to find really good owners and founders that want to put money into something like that.
So as Vocana becomes successful, you'll see, as you mentioned, this bifurcation of indies going to something like Vocana because they just don't get paid as much, or it takes forever to get the kind of payment they want from a major DSP. But then you're creating like this little indie, I shouldn't say little, this indie ecosystem, this self-enclosed ecosystem in a sense that may not have the biggest hits on it, but is for people who are looking to discover new independent music.
Yeah, look, what we've done so far is we've already licensed most of the independent content. We have deals with Downtown Artists and Label Services, CD Baby, DistroKid. We're talking to Merlin right now. So we already have 45, 50 million tracks on here. So if you have music out there as an independent person using an independent distributor, we probably have your content already. But yes, we also encapsulate you in this full circle social media circle as well. So you can now share content, listen to content, know who your fans are, get your fans' email addresses. You know exactly who's listening to you. And on top of it, hopefully get paid more than you would on another DSP. I would never tell anybody not to go to Spotify or any of these other DSPs. I use Spotify, right? That's where your major label content is, etc. But I think the long tail approach of this, you will see artists in their first quarter or their first 6 months of their distribution checks. They may have 2 or 3 streams, but they made $400 or $500 on our platform versus what they would get, 3 or 4 cents on millions of plays on a larger DSP. So again, wouldn't tell anybody to pull their music off of any other DSP. Go make whatever money you can. But I think the long tail approach is they will see in their distribution check that they'll make more with us.
Interesting. This is going to be really interesting to see what happens with this, to have this pure user-centric payout model that hasn't been filtered through additional payouts somehow or market redistributions and things like that. It's going to be exciting to see. It's a great experiment, Neil.
Yeah. Well, look, it's when I came on board 4 years ago, it's taken 4 years to build. We wanted to solve 4 problems here at Vocana. One was kind of the unfair pay, right? Everybody was complaining, especially the last 3 years of, demonetization of a certain number of streams and people weren't making as much money. So that was one of them. And then giving data back to bands. Most of them just get a heat map or something when they look at their analytics. May say you have 1,000 people that listen to you in New York. Well, here we give actual email addresses back and actual first-person data back, so they can actually build those things up. And again, with the unfair competition, if we only have independence on the platform, you're not competing against major label algorithms or playlists or things like that. And then lastly, kind of the social aspect. Most people were bands had link trees sending people to 4 or 5 different places. And here we have all of those things in one. Your social community is here at the same time. So it's definitely an experiment. It's 4 problems that we wanted to solve, and you can't really run a business without solving problems. So we looked at the independent landscape and said, these are probably the 4 problems that if we can solve 2 or 3 of them, that would be great.
Hey, let's dig into some of that, Neil. So you have a focus on human curators. We've talked a bit about algorithms in this conversation. Tell me more about how you recruit and engage these curators and who are they? How does that work?
So we took the approach that, look, algorithms are not bad, but what you've seen from larger DSPs that the longer the algorithm goes, it's going to propagate the top listening funnel, right? So there's 12 million artists on Spotify. There's 3 million songs that go up a day, but they're only pushing the top 4 or 5 million. So how could we get away from that? And it was go back to the old school. If you went to an old record store back in the day, you would go to a record store and you would see the manager's wall. And the manager's wall had a bunch of different CDs on there that they curated themselves. Same with college radio DJs. If you remember the CMJ days, those guys were curating their own playlists. So we thought, why aren't we doing the same thing? There's a bunch of indie music out there that nobody's propping up. So why not go after college radio DJs now, people that are tastemakers that may have run old indie magazines like Alternative Press. We use Paige Owens as a tastemaker right now. So getting those people on and they have some acumen in a certain genre, they can go through our catalog, create a playlist, and then they're on our home feed, actually pushing up and propping up independent artists that would probably never get on a playlist anywhere else.
That is fun. I can't wait to see what kind of music gets discovered that way. And so there's so many great music critics and curators out there. And it seems like they've been a little lost in the current era. And so it's great to get those folks back into the mix. Now, you also have talked about some social features. They've been so hit or miss for streaming services, maybe ever since MySpace. Why is that the case?
Well, that was one thing we kind of wanted to recreate was the MySpace effect. In the early 2000s, bands used MySpace as their website, right? It was always MySpace / whatever band you were in. And you had a feed and you had photos and you could do so much that, there was a streaming player that was attached to it. So you kept these people in a flywheel. I don't know why it hasn't worked since MySpace. Obviously, MySpace was kind of killed by Facebook. But I think you have to look at the business model of the DSPs that first started, Apple and Spotify, et cetera, that first came out, were just trying to be streaming platforms, or they were just dipping their toe into streaming. They weren't looking at social. And once you get known for something as a business, people don't expect you to do something different. So I think for Spotify, when they tried some of these things, or SoundCloud, it was, you have to re-educate people on why they're there. They're not there just to consume music. They're now there to also be socially connected with some of these bands and other fans. And I think that the benefit of us is we're coming out as a social streaming network. We are not one or the other. We're both. So I think that was the reason why it hasn't worked. They've tried to bolt that on to something that was already a business model. And I'll tell you, just from experience of 4 years of doing this, it's very hard and very expensive to build both. So if you're a streaming platform, there's enough legality and copyright stuff, moderation, and then you tie a social platform on top of that. You're building two sets of companies for two different audiences. One is social and one is music. And it's very expensive. So I can see why some of these larger companies decided either to pull because it costs too much, or the marketing of it, they just said, hey, let's just stick with streaming instead of trying to prop up ourselves as a social streaming.
So what does this music-centric social ecosystem online look like? How does this work within a streaming universe?
I can only speak for ourselves. I don't know. I'm not in the boardrooms of anybody else. I can say for us, it was, again, one of the pillars of the four things that we wanted to solve was keeping people in a flywheel, discovery, unfair competition, and actually just keep people in this loop where if you want to talk to the band, you can actually go on their profile page, message them, DM them, get in their feed, talk about their videos, comment on the songs. And if you're a fan or a fan of another fan, you could now engage with each other. You can DM each other. You can create a hub. So everything is done in one kind of funnel instead of sending people to link trees or multiple places. I mean, if you look at the live show version of that today, is you typically go to a live show with a group of friends. You experience music together, right? And when you have a DSP, most of the time you have that on the side screen or you're doing 3 other things at the same time. You're not consuming that with multiple people. So I think if you could have this ecosystem where all the fans and all the bands can get together and listen to music and all collaborate at the same time, it's a perfect place for the bifurcation of streaming, right? Instead of sending people to multiple places to see an Instagram or a TikTok and then send them somewhere else to listen to your music, here you can do it all in one spot.
That sounds exciting. I mean, there's been so much fragmentation between where you listen to music, where you interact with bands, where you interact with friends, where you interact with other fans. It's like all over the place. And I mean, it is so funny that it's taken this long to get back to a place where there is a truly social engaging platform that's focused on music.
Yeah. I mean, you've seen some of it with Roblox and these other places where they're trying to put people together with listening to music and having some engagement together, and people are flocking to that, right? I think COVID was unfortunate where it kept people separated, but now you're 5-6 years post COVID and the younger generation doesn't remember it because they were too young. And they're like, hey, I want to experience this with other people versus just experiencing all of this stuff in a silo. So we're hoping kind of recreating the MySpace social and streaming aspect brings people back together to listen to music.
Yeah, very cool. All right, we have to take a quick break. And when we come back, I want to widen a little bit and talk about what is going on with indie music as a whole. We'll be right back.
You've heard Dmitri and Trista on the podcast. Now come hang out with them. I'm talking about Seismic Activity, Music Tectonic's free online event series. About once a month, we convene the music tech community for networking, discussions, and demos by innovators and inventors. Join us and tune into the tremors that are about to become major shakeups in the industry. See upcoming topics on our schedule and register for our next event at musictectonics.com. These aren't your usual sleepy webinars. Seismic activity is fun, fast-paced, and interactive. Everyone who works for Music and Tech Meet is welcome. See you soon.
Now back to the show.
Okay, we're back, Neil. And there are these two storylines that pop up a lot around indie music. One is that it's growing like crazy, and then the other is that it's struggling. I mean, certainly you see the independent venues closing. We've already talked a little bit about payouts shrinking. All these different things are happening when we talk about independent music. What is the story? What's happening here? What gives between these two different storylines?
I think you're right. Everything that you see today it's indie music's either thriving or it's dying. And I think you have to look at it from two different segments. There will always be kids in a band, in a garage, picking up a guitar. There's a plethora of those kids everywhere, every day. So you can't say that indie music essentially is cratering, because that's never going to stop. The more people that are out being artists, the better for the industry of a whole. So I don't think the number of artists or bands will ever get to a point where independent music craters. There's always going to be more independent creators than major label content. However, if you take the second side of that, the vertical of venues, what I try to tell people is, especially on the local side of venues, a local venue where you go play, I hate to say, is not a connoisseur of independent music. Some of them may be, and some of them may have a local booking agent. They may try to get some local talent in there. But let's unpack what a local venue is. They're trying to sell liquor and beer. So if a guy gets on a microphone and farts for an hour and they do a register of $5,000, they will book the guy that farts for $5,000 because they're making money. They're a liquor and beer business. So yes, some of these local venues are closing because they can't get people, whether they're farting or playing music, to actually prop up revenue, correct? So until artists are drawing enough people to bring in revenue for a register to ding every day, those venues are going to hurt. And the artists that can now bring in enough people, they're actually only making money off of touring. So their prices are going higher. So now they're pricing themselves out of a small market or a small venues market. So I think that gets back to the streaming problem is bands aren't being discovered. So they can't get enough fans in a local area to get people there. And they're not being streamed enough to be able to be found to go on a big tour. So if we can kind of meet in the middle, if Vocana could help that, where in a local place you could now get enough streams, where you work with a local venue, where you have enough of a draw, you could probably prop up some of those venues and get them paid better and keep them in business. But I think if we continue down this, you can't find local bands. They're not being paid well. They're not being discovered and nobody's listening to them. Local venues are going to have a harder and a harder time to make money to keep the register open. They can't be everything to everyone. Everybody wants local venues to pay top tier money to local talent that bring nobody. And that's not going to happen. They can't pay their bills that way.
Yeah, I guess the live side is very different than the recorded side. But we do still see that the amount of music coming from independent recording artists is still growing like crazy. And this is where it gets interesting, I think, for Vocana.
Yeah, if you look at the landscape in just 5 to 8 years, what the CD Babies and the Distro Kids of the world, these independent distributors are taking a ton of content, right? There's a ton of people making music. And now with independent distributors, you can get your music everywhere. So yes, there's going to be more and more music coming, which looks great on paper. Like we just said, it looks like it's booming. But if you look at the other side of that, how do you make revenue for both the band and the company that's working with the independent? That's where I think it kind of it's not getting to the amount of people that the independents are, right? Like there's just not enough revenue there yet to kind of prop up the indies that are there. So it's difficult. And I think it's, again, part of discovery and how you get people to listen to more bands that are kind of underserved today, so that other independent places like the distributors and the venues, the ticket people, can make just as much money as they would with a major label.
So I want to rewind to something that's been in the news a lot that we haven't talked about yet. And it just seems silly for us to have this entire conversation about streaming and independent artists without getting into it. Why are so many artists leaving Spotify?
Look, that's a loaded question. I think obviously there are people that don't like certain things that Daniel Elk did with the money. There's political views there. He's since stepped down. Will people come back to Spotify? I don't know. But I look at it from the information that we glean from all of these independent artists that come to work with us is they don't get paid. So I think that's the biggest problem that Spotify or any DSP has is we've made it so simple for an artist to be able to create a song, put it through a distributor, and get it on Spotify. But it's very hard for them to monetize that. So I think you have to have either a Vocana or somebody that's paying better. The more Spotify comes up with ideas like demonetizing the first 1,000 streams doesn't bode well for their marketing to independent bands, right? They're going to leave. I don't know whether they'll leave in droves. We've seen little pockets of it here or there. Again, I'm not a proponent of somebody just pulling their music off Spotify. If you can get on Spotify and make money, then go do it. But I think people will continually leave for a multitude of reasons, whether it's payment, they can't get discovered on there, so they feel like they're spending tons of money, recording music and then not getting found and then not getting paid back. They can blame that all on Spotify if they want and pull their music down. But whether that hurts or helps them, I don't know.
Well, this has been really interesting to dig in with you about Vocana because your model alone and your features kind of tell a different story, and it kind of creates, I think, an opportunity for hope for independent music. But I will say, before we wrap up, everyone assumes the streaming wars are over and that the winners are Spotify and the big tech companies that have more of an ecosystem play like an Apple Music, a YouTube, an Amazon. Is there a different future than that, Neil? What does it look like?
Well, not to toot our own horn, but I would say, yeah, I mean, those guys have the major label market, right? And I don't think they will always be the 800-pound gorilla that pays well for a major label artist. But I think the other way is this bifurcation that people are talking about. I think we have to get into a streaming scenario where you don't have to start on Spotify. You can start on a small service like Vocana, and instead of hoping to get 25,000 streams on Spotify, which only pays you $80, or if you have, I think 99.8% of all the music on Spotify makes under $10,000. I mean, that's not even minimum wage. We have to come to a realization that there are always going to be major players. And the streaming business has not matured enough yet to bifurcate to give people chances in different areas, right, of streaming. And I think we saw that in the physical medium when CDs first came out. You could get into retailers, but people were slinging CDs on the side at venues. And we don't have that today. You can't sling a stream on the side, but you may be able to sell or stream at Vocana with less competition and make some money and then potentially move to Spotify at some point. So I don't think I think they have a grasp, they have a stranglehold, but there's plenty of room in the streaming world for giving artists a chance at a lower level to make money and make their name.
Well, this has been super interesting, Neil. It is Music Tectonics Week, and you are here the day this publishes on the podcast platforms. You're here at Music Tectonics this week. What are your goals when you come to a conference like ours?
I speak at a bunch of different conferences. I also talk, obviously any of these conferences are huge for networking, but Music Tectonics really focuses on tech, and you meet a bunch of cool founders. You meet VCs, you meet labels and managers and people that are trying to find the next thing to help music. And I think it's not just business oriented. It's a place where you can come and try to find like-minded individuals that are trying to help the music industry and all the artists and all the players involved. I think some of the conferences that you can go to feel very car salesman-y. Everybody's just walking around, where Tectonics is more of a, hey, I know you and I know what you do. Let's put our minds together and try to find another way to do something else. So it's a great place to share ideas.
I love that, Neil. I appreciate you saying that. I was at a meetup in Seattle a couple of weeks ago, and one of the people there was working with a CEO of a smaller record label and kind of an entrepreneurial founder, and said, I need my CEO there to meet other founders and other CEOs to share some of those challenges and do that kind of problem solving together that you were talking about. So I really appreciate that perspective. Neil, what you're doing is really exciting. I can't wait to see what happens with Vocana. I'm looking forward to hanging out with you this week in Santa Monica and seeing what you do for independent music. It's been a blast talking to you.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Dmitri.
Thanks for listening to Music Tectonics. If you like what you hear, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. We have new episodes for you every week. Did you know we do free monthly online events that you, our lovely podcast listeners, can join? Find out more at musictectonics.com. And while you're there, look for the latest about our annual conference and sign up for our newsletter to get updates. Everything we do explores the seismic shifts that shake up music and technology, the way the Earth's tectonic plates cause quakes and make mountains. Connect with Music Tectonics on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. That's my favorite platform. Connect with me, Dmitri Vitsa, if you can spell it. We'll be back again next week, if not sooner.
You're listening to Music Tectonics.